Hello everyone and welcome to an Outlast Trials dive into the new project Deep Burn. With its release, Red Barrels has unveiled more lore documents about a few interesting subjects. I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts and opinions on these subjects, and of course, if I miss anything, feel free to comment down below. But without any further delays, let's talk about what we know so far. Let us begin with the project itself, with Deep Burn introducing a number of obvious fire-related traps and objectives, and why it's being added into the trials in the first place. Avallanos and Lawler are discussing the increased use of fire. Lawler is shown not being a fan of the use of fires for reagents to use as weapons once they become reborn and eliminating targets. Avallanos sees this though as a means to an end, and clearly isn't bothered by the sudden rise of so many reagents becoming pyromaniacs post-therapy. Fire, pyromaniacs, and the sun are all very intertwined at this moment, as we see Dr. Easterman writes about the subject after assumedly learning about the disapproval of fire. Dr. Easterman sees this as an act against the sun, and thus his children, and possibly even himself. Interestingly enough, he describes this bureaucratic indecision as giving him toska, a Russian word for deep spiritual anguish or melancholy, and a profound sense of spiritual unease or longing. Keep this in mind, as it will come up later in the video. Continuing on, he sees himself as a gift, presumably still in a godlike state. He sees himself most likely as a messiah of sorts. He wishes to teach the reagents to love fires less, likening them to someone loving a wine without being an alcoholic, though he doesn't wish to apologize to the sun still having heavy symbolism to God, and in his mind, himself. To love fire is to love the sun, and to love the sun is to love Dr. Easterman, to which he doesn't apologize for having them love him too much. To extinguish one's love of fire, water must be used. As he writes, water is symbolic to both birth and death, and writes about his own personal experiences with water to diminish this love of fire, to control their fervor to God. A few days later, Project Deep Burn is authorized. Notably, the so-called water that is used to extinguish the fire barrels is non-potable, largely human and animal sourced, and makes note that any skin contact by staff should be followed by decontamination and a full course of antibiotics. This is clearly not normal water, but water extracted from human and animal sewage. Water is usually seen as pure though. Here, they make note to describe that it is barely even seen as water. This could be Signala twisting the idea of the trials. Perhaps this allows them to save money in the trials, or this hints at something else. Moving on, we can investigate the documents under Beloved, with a transcript between Dr. Easterman and Silas Knisley. The same Silas Knisley was part of the Human Resources and Corrections Department for Mount Massive Asylum, who corresponded with Avallanos. Knisley mentions 5 patients that represents metrics that Avallanos has looked for, and he seems flustered if Avallanos will join the meeting. To which Dr. Easterman states that this is his concern, and notes Knisley reminds him of someone around the eyes, presumably Clyde Perry. Dr. Easterman speaking about one of the 5 patients, to which Knisley mentions how she is quite provocative. Dr. Easterman notes her story as being as reported, including that of the siege of Leningrad, along with business in the forest. Knisley though notes how she's difficult to interview. Dr. Easterman notes that perhaps with Russian or French it'd be easier. Knisley speaks on other material this patient mostly talks about, that the historical details come from her victim or perhaps acolyte, though Dr. Easterman sees it more like an investor. Knisley mentions this acolyte or investor as being physically compromised, and that they couldn't find all the pieces, which Knisley finds himself being enclosed by Dr. Easterman, most likely being touched inappropriately, as sounds of a light altercation is noted. Dr. Easterman spontaneously seems to be interested in Knisley either due to looking like Clyde Perry, which could be perhaps repressed feelings that he had towards his former collections officer, maybe a display of power on colleagues, or maybe something about this patient. Moving on, he asks about her tongue. Knisley, composing himself, mentions how she has irregularities, Dr. Easterman noting an absent lingual frenulum, the thin fold of tissue located under the tongue that connects the tongue to the floor of the mouth. This would give her a notably long tongue similar to Gene Simmons. This patient also has a gastrostige pattern of musculature along her tongue as well. This is the strangest thing about this patient so far, as that particular pattern is mostly for scales under the belly of snakes, thus allowing them to move and are more commonly known as ventral scales. I personally doubt that she has a scaly tongue, but this particular pattern could signify perhaps body modification along with her missing lingual frenulum. Oddly enough, here, Dr. Easterman notes the same thing Knisley did moments ago, calling her a provocative specimen, almost being lulled in. Provocative does not have to signify arousal, but can mean any other strong reaction. In this particular situation, however, I believe it does mean arousal, at least to Dr. Easterman, as he seems drawn towards the patient, and to Knisley, almost hypnotized. If you recall earlier, Dr. Easterman uses the Russian word Toska, and this patient being around during the siege of Leningrad, it's safe to assume her Russian origin. It's also safe to say this patient is most likely signaling our next prime asset, with the amount of details we were receiving about her. She has the charisma to draw in other acolytes, who she seemingly rips to shreds like a black widow, potentially hypnotizing those who are near her. Her role could be to play that of a priest, though more accurately, a cult. Her charisma has such a draw that it seems to be luring in Dr. Easterman, though his mind isn't exactly in the strongest of places, and it hasn't been for quite some time. They mention 4 other patients, however. That makes me wonder if this prime asset is going to use other members to perhaps have a wider influence in the trials, to signify her prowess to lure and use others. Finally, we come to some upcoming modifications for an insertion gate redesign. Noting they cannot overlap with XPOP or prime asset insertion gates. This new modification to the therapy introduces new dangers for both reagent containment and safety. Along with these modifications, we get a personal journal entry of Dr. Easterman, writing how the reagents still dream of Amelia, about escape. This is maddening to a man who sees himself as a god, a loved father. He wants to teach the reagents, but how can he if they don't trust him? Noting that reagents think they can trust each other, but he needs them to trust him. Along with the modifications, I believe we are seeing the first hints at the PvP design. The enemy players won't be controlling XPops or prime assets, but seem to be receiving their own personal insertion gates to keep everything separated. Obviously not much is said how it will still run, but with the mention of trust, it seems he wants the reagents to doubt one another, and what better way to do that than to pit them against each other. That is all I have for now, but in the meantime, let me know your thoughts and theories, as I'd love to hear them. Let me know if I missed any details, and don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on future videos, some videos being Let's Plays and some being these lore and theory videos that will be posted at least once a week. Don't be afraid to let me know some other subjects you'd be interested in seeing either, and hopefully I see you all in the next video. See you then.